You're listening to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans.
I'm really happy to be here. It's a pleasure for me.
Fonte with a scooping header.
I would like to make the most of with this opportunity.
It's infield to Mane, 25 yards out. Lovely ball for Pella. Onside, 1-0. Buffon shot. Oh my word.
He ran around a bit like Bambi on ice. Really very, very embarrassing to watch.
And now, your host, Matt Markstone. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans. My name is Matt Markstone. I'm the host of the show. And no matter where you are, no matter how you may be joining us, whether this is your first time or you've been here before, thank you for making the show part of your day. I hope that you enjoy it. On this week's episode, I'm joined by Alex Hammond. Alex writes for Read Southampton and La Liga News. He speaks 3 languages, so when he says Pellegrino out, hopefully it's in a way that you haven't quite heard before, because much of what we're going to talk about this week, we have talked about before. We saw some of the same downfalls again against Watford that we've seen in the past. We saw poor use of substitutions. We saw a lack of a plan B. We've seen a questionable maybe team selection. And although we had a very impressive first half, when the team came out at halftime, they were very flat. And they were overrun by a Watford side that had some fight injected into them by their manager and their captain, and we are definitely lacking that. So we will talk about all of that with Alex shortly. If you don't follow Alex on Twitter, you can do so at St. Hammond, and be sure to check out his match report on the Watford match and all of his other writing over at Read Southampton. And if you're interested in La Liga, he also writes, like I said, for La Liga News. Before we get to the interview with Alex, though, I'd like to remind you to check out the We Are Southampton page on Instagram for match day edits, polls, competitions, and more. Be sure to check out the We Are Southampton page on Instagram. Matt, who runs the page, has been a guest on this show. He did the logo for the show. He's been a huge help in getting this started, and I couldn't do this without him. So please check out the We Are Southampton page on Instagram. And while you're on Instagram, be sure to check out the show's Instagram. It's at SFCDELL_IVERY, same as on Twitter. And I'm trying some things over there that I don't try on Twitter, trying to put up one post a day on something to do with the team or the podcast or a combination of both. And I think it's going well. But if you're on Instagram, do check it out and let me know what you think. All right. And let's get to my interview with Alex now. And once again, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy it. I'd like to welcome to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, Alex Hammond. You can find him on Twitter at St. Hammond. You can get his match reports and other writing at Read Southampton. Alex is here to recap the Watford match and talk about all the things that happened there. And we'll even take some listener questions towards the end of the show. So Alex, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. How are you? And welcome to the show.
I'm fine, Matt. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
My absolute pleasure. You know, we were trying to set this up for a while, and we were hoping that the Watford match would be a good one to go off of, but it turns out, you know, maybe a little bit of a bitter taste in everybody's mouth after yesterday, especially about the way that the match kind of ended. But we'll get to the match in just a second. But first off, you are a Southampton fan, and you are writing for Read Southampton and also for a La Liga site. Is that correct?
Yeah, I write for La Liga News for about 3-4 weeks now, and I've written for Read Southampton for about a year now. Awesome.
So where are you originally from? The Southampton area, or are you
No, originally I was born in Harrow in Middlesex, which is a county in northwest London, but now I live in Southampton because I study at Southampton University.
Awesome. And so growing up then, what current Premier League team is the closest to where you used to live?
In terms of location, it would probably be Watford, 20 minutes-ish from where I live. It would have definitely been Watford.
Was that the biggest team then when you grew up, or where you grew up, or were people more kind of inclined to cheer for one of the bigger London clubs?
Throughout my school days, it would definitely be the bigger teams, the Arsenals, the Chelseas, the Man Uniteds. But as I got older, then more local clubs came in, so there were the odd Watford fans Wealdstone fans as well, the lesser league teams as well. But yeah, Watford was not very well supported, not very popular back in the school day, but the big boys were obviously the dominant forces.
Sure. Does kit color have anything to do with that? The fact that they're yellow?
I have no idea, honestly.
But growing up in Watford, how did you become a Southampton fan?
My dad was a Southampton fan. He grew up in the sort of Southampton area. His brother, my uncle, was also a Southampton fan. Got taken to many Southampton games with my dad and my uncle, and then gradually it started becoming a Southampton fan. So
all right. And then did you guys go to more growing up? Did you guys go to more away games then, since you guys were in London and Southampton would have been traveling there, or did you guys kind of make the trip down to Southampton to St. Mary's fairly often?
No, we did go to a few away games. When we were in the Championship, we went to the Valley, which was the Charlton Stadium. We went to Selhurst Park, which was Palace's stadium when they were back in the Championship as well. We also went to Millwall twice, which was a very daunting experience for any away supporter. Premier League, been to Vicarage Road, obviously, went yesterday and the year before. I went to Stamford Bridge a couple of years ago, and I sat in the away end with a friend of mine who's a Chelsea fan, and it was when Southampton scored after 15 seconds. So I had to try and stay calm, and also went to Wembley for the Johnson's Paint Trophy final and the EFL Cup final. But home games were definitely we went to a lot of home games when we were in League One and the Championship. The football was, for the ticket prices and for the football we were watching, we were scoring goals on a consistent basis, winning games as well. It was so much more entertaining. I kind of wish it was like that now.
You're not the first person to wish for that at all. So based on some of the away experiences that you've had, do you have a favorite kind of stadium to go see outside of St. Mary's?
In terms of the actual match day experience, not in terms of atmosphere, in terms of the match day experience, Wembley was definitely the best. Even though we lost the EFL Cup final, the atmosphere was just amazing. The fans singing, the people turning on the torches when it was dark, it was probably one of the best, in terms of a football fan, probably one of the best experiences. Also, not away, but at St. Mary's, when we got promoted to the Premier League, that was probably as well one of the best games I've been to.
So you mentioned your dad's a Saints supporter. Do you have any your dad and your uncle, anybody else in the family on the Saints kind of side of things, or anybody else supporting any other teams in your family?
Well, my mum, she doesn't mind football, so we're making her a Saint officially.
Okay.
We have French family. I'll try and make them Southampton fans, but I think they'll stick to the French side of things, and also a bit of Dutch there as well. He follows Southampton because when Koeman was manager as well, there was the Dutch side of things there. So
your French family, do they what team or what area do they live in France?
Marseille.
Okay.
So I follow that team as well.
Am I correct in thinking that their kind of stadium and their away fans, their ultras, are pretty rowdy as well?
Yeah, they would definitely be, with the European fans, I think they would definitely be categorized under like the hardcore sort of fans.
Yeah. So like not where you like you mentioned Millwall earlier. Would it be similar to that maybe in terms of visiting that stadium as an away supporter? Probably.
I mean, the atmosphere, I haven't been to a Marseille game, but if I would love to go to one just to see the atmosphere. But for an away fan, it must be extremely daunting. You must feel like you're about 2 feet tall and, everyone's just watching over you because the stadium is huge.
And I can't imagine, what it's like to be in somebody else's stadium and have the stewards there and kind of the separate entrance and all that stuff. Like that's a totally different experience. And it's hard for me to imagine, I guess, other than, because I've only ever seen it on TV.
Yeah, it's weird as well because I went to the Europa League games, and I also went to the one where Southampton got knocked out by, I think it was Hapoel Beersheva.
Yeah.
And because when they scored, it was about the 80th minute sort of time, and there were fans sat in the suite sort of area, so the Saints bar area, and there were Shiva fans sat there. When they scored, they started cheering, and everyone literally turned around and was looking at them. And it was one of the weirdest things I've seen.
Yeah, I I don't know. It would be hard for me to do that. I remember that game. I was at school. I was at work, and it was on. And I just remember just going like, "You got to be kidding me!" But that's another example of what happens when you sit and play for a draw instead of trying to or sit back too deep. But we'll get to that. But before we do, just real quick on your writing, how did you get involved in writing for Read Southampton and just writing about football in general?
So when I went to school, I had a friend of mine. He was passionate and he was a sports writer as well. He was specialising in football and Formula One, and he wrote a dissertation on Formula One. And I asked him, how he got into it, and he gave me contact details to write for the same website that he did, which back then was sort of betting preview sort of stuff. And I started writing about that, and then there were also previews, match reports, things like that. And my first published article was Southampton's 5-4 defeat against Red Bull Leipzig in a pre-season friendly. That was about I think it was the first season Koeman took over, so that would have been 4 years ago now. And from there, I wrote previews, reviews, and then I moved to a fancy football-based website as an editor, and I wrote match previews on the fancy football interests, in the interest of a fantasy football fan. And then an opportunity presented itself at Read Southampton. They were taking writers, and I said, this is what I'd like to do later on. Is it all right if I, start practicing and, build up my portfolio, things like that. And they took me on, thankfully. And then more recently, La Liga as well, same thing. That came through the university. They said, there's people looking for writers for La Liga. So I thought, why not extend the field? The bigger the niche, specializing in various things, you're more likely to stick out from the crowd. And they both gave me the opportunity to build a portfolio, and to that I'm really grateful.
Has writing about Southampton as the team that you like, is that easier, or is it more difficult than maybe writing about a team that you don't have maybe like an emotional connection to?
I tend to just brush it aside. I tend to put the professional cap on, as much as I'd like to, complain and say, the manager's this, the player's that, I just try and see it from a unbiased point of view, just write the report as if it was my job and then just publish it. And then afterwards I think about that, okay, so if I was not a fan, if I was not a reporter, how would I say this and that? So it's taught me how to, say things in a more conservative manner, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, sometimes like the guys from The Guardian or whatever, they have these kind of deadlines where they have to submit kind of on the final whistle or within like 10 minutes or whatever. And so they're writing all during the match. And then something like happens like yesterday where Watford, somehow get a late goal and it kind of changes the whole thing. Are you under deadlines like that, or do you get to kind of wait for a few hours or the next day, or how does that work?
With the Read Southampton one, it tends to be the same day or the day after. As long as it's within that sort of time frame, it's fine. With La Liga, it tends to be a few hours because there's a lot more things to cover. There's a lot more news to cover, a lot more reviews to cover.
Okay.
So with La Liga, it's a bit tighter. But yeah, as long as it's done at maximum 24 hours after, it's fine.
Has it at all changed the way that you watch the Southampton matches specifically? Because like doing this podcast, like now when I watch, I take notes, and I kind of like make sure I have kind of things in order for the most part. And I still get things wrong, of course. But do you, going from like yesterday being at the match, are you doing anything differently knowing that you have to write a match report, or are you just kind of going and watching and then you'll kind of, look up the timings or whatever later on?
Yeah, when I go to a game, I still tend to get the same buzz I used to get when I was a boy going to my first few games. So when Southampton score, I'll cheer like a normal fan and applaud and things like that. But throughout the other times of the game, I do like watching the game from a tactical point of view, like player movement, positioning, passing, dribbling, things that we can analyse and think that players can improve upon. So yeah, I tend to look at games from a tactical point of view, and then after the game, I'll do the timing, the notes, the different things like that.
All right. Well, are you okay now kind of moving on and talking about yesterday's match against Watford?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. And you mentioned you were there. Yeah. Were you in the Southampton away section?
I was, yes. Sold out cramped away end.
Yeah, it seems like our traveling fans again have been representing the club well. In terms of last week at Fulham, this week against Watford. It seems like every time we go away, they do a great job. It doesn't seem always like the crowd at St. Mary's is always as loud or as kind of boisterous, and people have described it as toxic quite often. But it doesn't so much seem like the away fans. Of course, last week against Fulham, they did chant at Mauricio Pellegrino like something about "you don't know what you're doing." But which people I think turn their heads and go like, "What are you doing? You guys are winning." But anyway, we won't talk about that just yet. But atmosphere was good yesterday. How did it change a lot from the first half to the second half? It seemed like the Watford fans kind of got into it a bit more late on in the match.
I think the turning point of the game was definitely when Watford brought on Deeney, because obviously he's a club favourite for them, and because he's so massively physical, he is literally like an NFL player.
Yeah.
They could just lump the ball forward and he would head everything down, and that gives the team confidence. It gave Watford the confidence that they had a route back into the game. And obviously Southampton, they just couldn't handle it. And whether that's down to personnel or tactics, they just crumbled.
Absolutely. So let's start first off with the lineup that the manager put out yesterday. No surprise, I don't think that he stuck with McCarthy in goal after kind of the performances that he's had recently. He's been pretty good, I think. Yeah. With Cedric being back healthy, that was one of the ones we were kind of worried about. He was going to be a late kind of fitness test according to Pellegrino's press conference a few days ago. Same with Hoot. So for him and Stevens to be there with Yoshida being out injured, I guess that's fine. And then Bertrand kind of shoring up the back line. I think that's as strong as a back four as we're going to get right now. And I kind of think that Stevens and Hoot may be the center backs of the future for the club. But moving into the midfield, a lot of people were kind of upset that it's Romeu again getting the start next to Højbjerg and not maybe Lamina and Højbjerg. But did you have any thoughts on that? Are you okay with Romeu retaining a spot, even if he's not been quite up to maybe his standards of last season?
Personally, I think Romeu deserves to be in the team. I mean, he does what his job is to break down the attacks, and he's a physical presence in the team, and that's perfect. He fills out that role really well. I'd compare him to Schneiderlin in a way. That's the role that he's taken, just breaking down opposition attacks. But personally, the person I was surprised to see in the side was Davis. I know he's our captain, and you feel obligated to start him, but he's just too slow. He just passes the ball sideways. Someone like Lamina, he played in the Champions League final against Madrid, and he's our record signing. So you think he should be starting every game, but he's really strong. He's brilliant. He's dynamic. He gets out of small, tight spaces. He gets sent forward. We saw it yesterday. And Davis was even at fault for the first goal. So I think for the next game against Tottenham, I think it is.
Yes.
It should be Lamina, Romeu, and Højbjerg, all three of them in the midfield.
Now, for a long time, we've been playing the 4-2-3-1 kind of formation. And I know that Pellegrino likes to move players around and kind of change formation as the game, whether in attack or defense. But yesterday, was it clear to you that we were maybe playing like a 4-1-4-1 or a 4-4-1-1 or something that wasn't quite the 4-2-3-1 that we've been seeing in weeks past?
Yeah, it looked like a bit of a 4-3-3, but with one of the midfielders being brought a bit further back. So it looked as though Romeu was brought back as the holding midfielder, and you had Højbjerg and Lamina just in front of them, just to try and tighten up the midfield and to try and keep the space between the defence and the midfield really tight. But I just don't think it worked, honestly.
Yeah, and like you said with Davis, you're not the first person, obviously, to point out that he is slow and kind of tedious on the ball. And I think he's one of those players that it's hard for a lot of fans to maybe criticize him because he does all the right things in terms of his attitude and kind of putting in the work and all of those things. But I don't know, yesterday when I saw him in the side, I kind of think, and I could be completely wrong here, that if Yoshida's fit, Yoshida plays in the back line and Yoshida captains the side and Davis doesn't make it. But because Yoshida is out and you need a captain, and this is something that I would like to talk about, and I guess this is a good time to do it, is even though Davis is the captain, he doesn't really seem like the captain. You know, he doesn't seem like he's out there actually bossing people around and not getting in people's faces, but kind of correcting behavior and organizing the way that a guy like Font used to be able to do.
Definitely. I mean, I think from yesterday's game, the leader in the team, I would think would probably, as young as he is, it would have to be someone like Højbjerg or Ward-Prowse. They shout at players, they tell them what to do, they boss them around. They're definitely the leaders in the team, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Ward-Prowse, of course, is the England, I think, under 23 captain, right?
Yeah, and he's already got the experience of being a captain for his country. So surely for the club, it would be, maybe he's a bit, in Pellegrino's eyes, he's a bit inexperienced, but I think he could relish in the captain's role.
Yeah, and he is doing more and more to make that position his on the right side of the midfield, which is good to see, because for a long time we were kind of wondering, when does he go from being the next big thing to actually being the big thing? When does he actually establish himself? And he is doing more and more of that, and performances like yesterday can only help his cause. But yeah, it just really seemed, and we'll talk about it after halftime, the drastic difference, from when Deeney comes on and when Deeney takes that armband. And Troy Deeney is not for me as an opposition fan, I don't think he's a very likable character. He does some things that I don't personally like. He kind of rubs me the wrong way, but he galvanizes the team, and he is out there demanding things of his teammates, and the team just played a lot better with him on the pitch versus that first half when they were pretty bad. It seems like we switched teams at halftime almost.
Yeah.
But did you have any issues really with who was in the squad, and other than what we've already mentioned?
I would have liked to have seen Woeful on the pitch instead of Tadic, because I feel his inconsistency can be very, very, very frustrating. 1 minute he glides past players easily, and then the next he's just giving the ball away, not really showing the effort levels. It seems like he's almost undroppable from Pellegrino, as if Pellegrino is to say he's the player I'm building the squad around. But I'd like to see Woeful in there, even Sims, because someone with pace would have definitely threatened someone like Janmaat, who's not the quickest fullback, just to get in behind. And also Gabbiadini. I mean, I know Long contributed a lot yesterday, and he showed why he's in the team to counter-attack, which is Pellegrino's style. But I don't understand why Pellegrino has such a reluctance to play Gabbiadini for the talent that the Italian has. It's a bit mind-boggling.
Yeah. He seems like he's definitely being frozen out of the squad, and there were people tweeting yesterday, you have our permission to go and find a place to play.
I've seen that one, yeah.
But it's, I don't know. The one thing that did jump out is there was a lot of support for Nathan Redmond over the past week for some of the abuse that he's been getting from fans over recent weeks. And he didn't even make the matchday squad. Do you think it's, we're just speculating, but do you think it's the manager saying you're not good enough and we have Sims and we're going to play Sims over you? Or do you think it's just give him a week off, let him kind of clear his head, and he'll be back soon?
I would hope it would be to let him clear his head, just to say, take your time, But for the fans to abuse a player, especially your own player during the game, it's not going to help. It's just not necessary. Just, he might not be on the best game, but just let him continue playing, and then, it's not very good, but just let your feelings be known, on Twitter or something like that. But his confidence is shot right now. He is really low on confidence. But I think if he gets back into the team, has a good run in the squad, starts getting some assists or some goals, then he can be, the player that we hoped he would be when Puel signed him last season.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think that maybe the lack of confidence that he is showing is starting to show up in the rest of the squad as well?
Definitely. I think Southampton would describe themselves as the best of the rest in a way. So when players sign for Southampton, they would be thinking, okay, so we're going to be relatively high in the table. We're going to be doing all right. We'll be chasing Europa League places. But we haven't won in 10 games now, I think it is. And the players just don't know what to do. I don't think they're playing for the manager. I think when you look at teams around us, the players, they've not been performing, and then the manager goes, the new one comes in, and then they start performing really well. I think Everton are a prime example of that. You begin to wonder whether that's the move that Southampton are going to have to take, because if it continues like this, we'll be playing twice a week in the Championship.
That's a worrying prospect, because it is, just personally, selfishly, it's going to be hard to watch just because they won't be on TV. Yeah. And obviously I don't live anywhere near being able to kind of show up and watch games in person, but we will, or very often at least, so we'll see. I guess going through the match, you were there. First half, we really seemed to come out and be the better team. And reading, looking at some of the BBC commentary and things like that, they kind of said like Southampton doesn't look like a team that's outside the relegation zone on goal difference alone. We looked so good that first half. There were a few instances in the first half where I want to say Gray kind of missed a shot. He kind of kicked it off himself, it looked like, and then Stevens took it in the face, and we just gave them a little bit too much space, I think, on around the edge of the area to try to put crosses and shots in. But it seems like we tightened that up almost instantly. But kind of throughout the first half up until James Ward-Prowse's goal, did you think we were the better team up until that point?
We definitely had a lot of the ball, just sort of passing it around, making Watford chase after the ball, not letting them have the ball. So yeah, we've done that for a while now, dominate the possession. And then from that, you'd expect the chances to start coming. So with possession comes chances, and with chances, you expect to score. And then we did score those 2 goals. Even the second one came from a Watford free kick, which we counter-attacked really well. And you would have thought that, we in the second half, we should have kept going, but we just didn't. We allowed Watford to we invited pressure, and it just, we capitulated.
Yeah. That first goal from James Ward-Prowse, when it came to him, it looked like he had kind of a lot of time, and then it was, is he going to get it away? And then I think he kicked it through somebody's legs and kind of just placed it in the corner. And it was great to see us go up 1-0 at that point. And then we continued to play with some confidence. And I think what everybody on Twitter was worried about is that we were going to sit back right away and just try to defend that lead. And we didn't as much. And then the counterattack for the second goal, I thought was fantastic. And you spoke of Long's contribution earlier. He is something different in terms of what he brings to the team. And when he does what he does yesterday, it's hard to say, hey, he shouldn't be in the team. Even though he is obviously, in terms of being a pure striker, he is not as good as Gabbiadini.
As much as I slate Long in front of everyone, he the one thing he will give you is effort and work rate. He will run his heart out every game. As a striker, he hasn't scored in a while. He did score against Palace, but before that he hadn't scored in a while. I think that might just be a confidence issue. But in terms of effort, he just cannot be faulted, and I think that's why he's in the team, because of his effort.
Sure. So the second goal that he was a part of yesterday, he it was a counterattack. He beat the man down the line. He found Tadic, and I was just hoping Tadic wasn't going to kick it into the stands. And he rolled it beautifully for Ward-Prowse to score again. And at that point, I think in recent weeks, even against Fulham last week, we were all saying, just get the second goal and kill the game off. This game should be done. And going into halftime with a 2-goal lead, I thought for sure, we just have to continue to play this way, and the game is over. This is it. We went into halftime, and then we came out and we just looked completely different. And so did Watford. Watford looked like they made some adjustments, and this is where I think it gets to the point where the manager, he's missing something. He's obviously not able to kind of keep the team going and build them back up and encourage them to do that kind of stuff. Whereas other managers, now we've seen Roy Hodgson do it against Crystal Palace. We've seen, Marco Silva do it last night. And it's getting worrying that we can't make the adjustments, and we can't kind of keep the momentum going anytime we get a lead.
I mean, I think I read yesterday that's now 11 points we've dropped from winning positions. You got to wonder what the mentality is when they take a lead. Is it? I mean, obviously it seems to be, sit back, invite the pressure, or counterattack. And even yesterday, as painful as it is to say, in the back of my mind, you sort of saw it coming. You saw that Watford had, they played much better in the second half. They had a focal point, which was deep, to get the ball into Deeney. We didn't have, when we got the ball, it was what do we do with it? We just didn't know what to do, and it cost us twice.
If you just added 11 points to our total, we would be sitting at, I think, 32 points. And that would put us in 8th place right now. Of course, that's
where we should be. Not
taking those points away from the other teams that are there, so it might be a little bit different. But 32 points, and that, I think people would be much happier. But I don't know. It's getting somewhat worrying. But heading into halftime, I thought we deserved the lead. I thought the scoreline was fair. I thought that some positives were that we didn't really sit back after the first goal. We had some chances to be up maybe 3 or 4-0.
Oh yeah, definitely.
When Long just seemed to take about 7.5 minutes to get his shot off when the goal was open.
Yeah, he could have taken it first time, but
man.
I think he took a touch and it allowed Ziegler to get the block in.
Yeah, that would have been big, you know. But that's where Gabbiadini scores, you know.
Or Austin.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. So that was a little bit frustrating, but even so, 2-0 going into halftime, you have to think that everybody has a bunch of confidence, and it would be somewhat difficult to kind of suck the confidence away from the team, you would think, but. Before, you know, whatever adjustments were made on our part by Pellegrino at halftime or weren't made, there are some quotes here from the Watford players. Troy Deeney says, the manager wasn't happy at halftime. The thing we pride ourselves on weren't there, and we wanted to rectify that. We mustn't forget that first half. It needs to be talked about as much as the second half. And the manager says in the first half, we didn't play with the right attitude or mentality. In the second half, we had the right commitment and mentality. And in the second half, we were Watford, but not in the first half. We were not. And for them to come out and say that, and for them to go in there, and whether it's Troy Deeney that's making that statement to the rest of his teammates, or whether it's the manager that's making that commitment, like that stuff has to happen in our dressing room with our manager and with our captain. And I think that's where we miss kind of a figure like Jose Font, or you can only imagine Ronald Koeman in the dressing room, even just preparing for matches or talking about matches that have happened in the past. Like, we can't keep making these same mistakes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, when I've watched Pellegrino's interview throughout the season, he definitely doesn't strike me as a man motivator. Just seems like someone who would bore the players at halftime. You know, the players would just want to go out to play the second half. So I don't know what they do or say at halftime, but it definitely doesn't help anything.
We mentioned earlier that Deeney came on immediately at halftime and changed the game for the most part. You know, he is, like you said, he was super physical, and that's one of those, with the center back pairing of Hoot and Stevens, kind of worry about that a little bit. You know, we never really worried about being out muscled when it was Font and Van Dijk or Font and Alderweireld. But when I think about Hoot, I remember him getting out muscled by Lukaku against United early in the season, you know, but that's really the only time. And other than that, like, he gave it to people just fine yesterday. And we were putting in challenges and things like that. We didn't really back down on the physical front, but I just think we increasingly sat deeper and deeper, and kind of our mentality was to do that, and we invited the pressure. And once they scored that first goal, I was worried. You know, I was worried that this was going to be another one of those games. Yeah, like we've seen this before. And I don't know what when the teams came out at halftime, how soon after halftime was it apparent that something was different for both teams?
Immediately. I mean, I think one of the first things that Watford did was pump the ball into the box, into Deeney, him heading it down, shooting. The tactic was obvious, and, you know, it was plain for all the fans to see. And I think that all the fans expected it because they could see what was going on. They could see that Deeney was, you know, the real threat, and we just didn't know how to deal with it. We just didn't have the right tactics to deal with Deeney. I think it's easy to say now, but someone like a Van Dijk who's tall and physical, I think would have dealt with Deeney much better than someone like Hoot or Stevens, who's not the strongest physically.
Right. After that first goal for Watford at 2-1, I don't know. The game seemed to kind of lack big moments from that point on. It wasn't really like either team was doing anything kind of noteworthy, but kind of sitting there watching, you know, kind of like you said, this is deja vu. We've seen this before. We've seen more pressure from Watford. It didn't seem like we could hold on to the ball. And then eventually, you know, we'll get to the Decore ball, but our substitutions come. Davis comes off for Lamina, and then the rest of the other two substitutions don't happen until stoppage time when it's tied.
Yeah, I mean, the substitutions were way too late. Those two substitutes could have come on 10, 15, 20 minutes before, and it would have made a difference, because if Pellegrino does pride himself on counter-attacking, then why wouldn't you bring on the pace of Sims and Buffal to counter-attack a team who are going full-out attack? And then you have Buffal, Long and Sims. You know, I mean, when Southampton got to the final of the EFL Cup final last year, in the semi-final against Liverpool, it was Sims and Long who combined to score the goal at Anfield to send Southampton to Wembley. So, I mean, it's just baffling. Those substitutions were too late. What impact can they make in 3 minutes? I mean,
3 minutes when all of the momentum is the other way.
Exactly.
There was no momentum on our side at all at that point. And Watford was even forced to make a change early on or late on in the first half because of an injury. And I still think that, Marco Silva made better use of his substitutions. He had used 2 substitutions before the start of the second half and still managed to bring on Okaka, who is another guy that I just don't like. And I think it's because every time he plays against us, he's physical. He's kind of in our faces, and he does just enough to put defenders off and things like that he causes trouble. And with those two coming in and going up top, we had very little chance, I think, of denying them goal scoring opportunities.
Yeah, the thing with Watford is that the players that they have some technically good players, but a lot of them are technically not as good, but they're just really annoying to play against because they're just physically powering. It's just hard for the defenders to deal with it. And I think sometimes that can be caught in the mind of the defender.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess now we have to talk about their second goal.
Oh, here we go.
I mean, obviously it's a handball.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
There were memes yesterday going around the internet of, nobody knew Watford had a professional basketball team, and things like that. But what were being in the stadium, was it clear to you guys? Is that on the opposite end of the stadium from where you guys are sitting, or how clear was it to you that something was wrong with the way that goal happened?
It was clear that something was wrong because the players were appealing very heavily against the linesman and the ref. So I didn't know what was wrong. I think it could have been an offside or something. I didn't think it was a handball when I saw it live, but when I looked at it again, oh my goodness, was it a handball? He literally scooped the ball into the net with his hand. Like, that's the sort of goal you'd expect a handball professional player to score, not a footballer. So it was just, I don't know. But the thing with it now that infuriates you the most is not the fact they actually win it. It's the fact that now that Southampton have an excuse. They even posted it on their own social media, a picture of the goal. I think they're using it as an excuse to sort of bypass the fact that we lost that 2-0 lead. And a lot of the fans have responded to that. They've recognised that Southampton are trying to get around this. Which I think is ridiculous, but yeah, the handball is just, it's another example of why we need VAR in professional football.
Yeah, and I'm torn here because it is very clearly that's illegal. That is not fair. If somebody does that in the game where I played yesterday after our game in a pickup game, nobody is allowing that. And if the guy wants to argue about it, like, somebody's going to fight him. Like, that's how bad it was. And I'm not advocating for violence against anybody, but, like, I don't know. On one hand, you want people on your team that are going to, he knew he missed it with his head and he had to get it in the net somehow because time is running out. And so he does it, and it's not on him to report himself, But again, like you said, this is something that Jose Mourinho would look to and say, like, this is the talking point now, and we can shift focus away from how we played that second half. And I don't think that's acceptable for us right now. I think that the way the second half went down, the way we played the second half, needs to be discussed and looked at. And if we find ourselves in that situation where this handball costs us 2 points, we put ourselves there,
Yeah, definitely.
And like you said, I think that needs to be discussed. And if you look at the stats and if you watch the second half, if you took all the goals kind of out of the game, you just kept the score away and didn't show any of the goals. If you just showed everybody the full match without the goals happening, you would probably say that a draw was fair.
Like they said on Match of the Day, it was a game of two halves. Southampton dominated the first and Watford dominated the second. And unfortunately, Southampton paid the price for being lazy, for allowing the pressure. And we saw it coming.
And I don't know, even looking at the first goal, we see situations again where our defenders are late to react. And this is another thing that we've seen again and again and again. It's like, if we're going to sit back that deep, you have to kind of be switched on the entire time. And for both goals, I think we made mistakes. The first goal, I don't think McCarthy has any blame for. He
made a good save at first.
And then Gray has all the time in the world to get under it and head it into the goal. And then the second goal, I understand that Hoot falls or slips and falls, but Bertrand is nowhere to be seen. And
that's exactly what I was saying. He wasn't in his natural left back position at the time.
And for me, that's what's frustrating, is the fact that we sat so deep, we didn't stay disciplined, we kind of failed to do the things that, if you're going to be a defensive team with a lead, that you have to be a defensive team with a lead, and we didn't even do that well. And that to me frustrates frustrates me. Now, if we have VAR, of course, the goal is overturned immediately. But like I said, I'm not sure that's fair. And I don't know how you feel kind of about that. But I can't even be mad really about the handball.
Yeah, I can sort of see it. I mean, in terms of the VAR, it's something that's been implemented in other leagues, and it has turned games around. But we would complain if it happened, if we were the team trailing and, we scored the goal thanks to that. We wouldn't be complaining because, that's a point earned for us. But seeing how we're in this position of 2 points dropped, this is potentially a season-defining moment.
Right. And kind of what I would say, looking at it, is I would say look at the other 9 points that we've dropped. This is 2, but if we had the other 9, this would hurt, but it wouldn't hurt as much.
Yeah, definitely.
But
it's all down to our defensive frailty.
Yeah. Sometimes you put yourself in situations where bad things can happen and bad things will happen. If you kind of keep yourself out of those situations, then you don't have to worry about them. And exactly. I think that's on us a little bit. And I don't want to by any means excuse the refereeing decision. I'm not saying that or whatever, but they didn't see it, and the referees are human, and mistakes happen. So I'm sure we will have a decision go our way at some point. It just doesn't feel like that right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Do you have any other thoughts on that match in particular?
No. I mean, I think everything's been covered. The handball's been covered. The late substitutions that happened too late have been talked about. I think the chances that we could have put away that we didn't put away, I just think it was prior to the game was probably a 6-pointer. Because Watford, in terms of form, down there with Southampton. I think it was 1 in 9 or something like that. It was a game that we had to win. We didn't, and at the end of the season, that could be costly.
All right, well, let's move on to some listener questions then. We have a couple from Twitter and from Instagram. None came in from Facebook, but that is okay. So we have one here from G, who is at vastmajority22, and he says, "What is Saints' best center back partnership? Hoyt, Yoshida, and Stevens all seem to have their own weaknesses. What pairing is most complementary to each other?"
In my opinion, it would probably be Hoot and Stevens. They're both very composed on the ball. The problem with Yoshida is that he's slipped back into his old ways of being a little bit nervous on the ball and a bit, weak in the defense. So in my opinion, it's probably definitely Hoot and Stevens.
Okay. All right. AJ Reardon, who is a longtime listener and a frequent questioner. I don't even know if that's the right word. But anyway, he's at Fred Lazaro 5 on Twitter. And he says, "I wish I had a new question for you all, only I'm plagued with the same 2 or 3. Most prominently, the question of why this team is terrified of a lead." And for me, I think that speaks to the lack of leadership that we kind of talked about earlier. The fact that we don't have a leader who kind of is out there and can instruct people, hey, we're shifting now. Even if you're going to shift to being defensive and sitting deep, it's the ability to organize that we are missing right now.
Yeah, it's also the lack of a clear game plan when we do sit back. When we do sit back and then we do get the ball, like I said, it's sort of a case of what we're going to do now. But just sitting back and inviting pressure, it's bound to get to cost you. Yes, it costs us the same as it usually does, maybe a bit more. But I just think if we had a natural leader on the pitch, I don't think Stevens is a leader, but he's not physically empowering leader like Deeney is. I think if we had someone like that, I think it would have been a lot better.
Yeah. Tom Mason, who's at Tom_Mason18 on Twitter, asks, "Which transfer do you feel as though the club should make after there are no moves 14 days into the window?" And just to kind of go back to your answer on the previous question, this is where the transfer window is not going to help us in terms of a leader. You're not going to bring in somebody like a longtime captain that's going to come into your club and be available and be able to lead the team. That's going to have to come from somebody who's been at the club and who is, a leader and has been there for a while. And I just don't see that happening. I look around the squad and I don't see those types of players. But to answer Tom's question, what areas do you think most need to be addressed in terms of the transfer window?
I would say a powerful centre-back, not a sort of a ball-playing defender, someone who's physical at the back, someone creative in the midfield. I would have said someone like Gaitan, who we've been linked with. Walcott would be a good one. I think his pace would be extremely beneficial for someone for our team who lack pace when we go forward. And maybe even a striker, I would say. So just a goal scorer, someone who scores goals. It's as simple as that. With Shane Long, for all his efforts and all the work rate he's putting in, if we're not going to put in the goals, we're not going to get any points.
Yeah, that's the truth. And especially now with Austin being out for however long and Gabbiadini just gone missing in terms of getting game time. We definitely need someone in there because, we can't rely on James Ward-Prowse to score 2 goals every game. That's, or to score 3 in 2 games. That's not his game for the most part. And, relying on guys like Romeu and things like that and Yoshida to score goals, that's just not going to get it done, We need the guys up top to contribute, and that's part of where the blame falls on Redmond and Long and other people for not getting that part of the job done. But then you wonder about tactics and service and all these other things that go into giving them the opportunity to score, but we're not privy to that information. So we're there. On Instagram, Saints FC Fanzone asks, who would you like to see as Southampton's next manager? And at this point, I'm not sure where you stand, but for the most part, people are Pellegrino out, and I would agree. I think everybody recognizes that it goes higher than that. That it's there are issues with the board and everything else. But if you were able to get rid of the manager and choose somebody else who's out there, who would you bring in maybe as a manager?
This is not many people have circulated around this name, but I'd be interested with Peter. He used to be Ajax's manager and Dortmund's manager. I say this with the Dutch family that Ajax and Southampton are very common, bringing in young players through the ranks, playing them and then developing them. I think he would be quite good for that. Berizzo as well, who got sacked from I think it was Sevilla a few weeks ago, could be interesting. But with managers, it's a bit of a minefield because you just don't know what they're going to do with your club, because it's just they don't know our squad yet. We don't know how they like to play, or how they would like to play with our squad. We just don't know. But I think at this rate, anyone other than Pellegrino would probably be an upgrade.
Yeah, it's I think it's been said before, but we're looking back at the Claude Puel days and going like, maybe it wasn't so bad, and I don't know. And the tough thing now about bringing in a manager is if you're bringing in a manager from a foreign league, then how long does it take him to adjust to the Premier League and to make, corrections and things like that to the squad and just get us on the right track, because we really don't have that many opportunities, we're going to be struggling for points. And so this is almost where you would look to bring in somebody that's like a Sam Allardyce, and I know he's not available, but like you bring him in and he stops the bleeding, he shores up the defense, and he's there for the season, and you move forward. But I don't see the club doing that. I don't see the club getting rid of the manager. I think they're going to stick with him for however long, and whether that means we go down because of that or not, that's kind of just what I think. And I didn't see that some of the sites suspended betting on the next manager sacked, which probably means a bunch of people laid money on Pellegrino to go. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think in Kruger's recent interview, I think he pretty much admitted that Pellegrino would stay on as manager, which I've never really understood Kruger's appointment in the first place, considering his sporting history. He's never owned a football club before or led a football club before. He's mainly in ice hockey, which are two completely different animals. And I think that, as you said, it goes higher. And if, Les Reed, who's the director of football, is still living as if we were in 2012 rather than in 2018, you are going to have a problem.
That does it for those questions. But a question for you. Anybody that you have written about in La Liga that we haven't maybe been linked with that you think would be a good fit for one of the positions you talked about earlier, probably in the attacking areas?
Well, the club that I like to cover the most in La Liga is Bilbao, and they have a 36-year-old striker, but he is so clinical in front of goal. Aerially, he is amazing. And when he's just, if you give him the right service, which is, you know, very questionable with Southampton at this rate, he will score the chances, but the chances of him leaving Bilbao are quite low. But Barcelona made a lot of their players available recently in the transfer window, so the likes of Denis Suarez and Paco Alcacer. I think those two would be really good additions to the squad, because any player who's played for a top club like Barcelona, they've been there, they're there on merit. They're not there because, you know, they got there luckily. So our players would look up to those players and, you know, try and seek a bit of inspiration, or even, you know, sense there's a bit of competition, and they'll raise their own game. So yeah, anyone like that would be a really good addition.
And then one kind of just random question. I know that you write a lot about La Liga, especially recently. Is there a stadium or an away day that you would most like to take in La Liga?
Probably Real Madrid or Barcelona. Those are the two, because I've visited both just on a tour in general, and even with it empty, it's probably one of the best stadiums I've been to. So for a game, I would love to go to one of those two. Maybe even for El Clasico. Who knows? Yeah.
That rivalry. That I don't watch La Liga very often, but I will make time to watch the Clasico almost every time. But I don't know. That's just me. But do you have anything else that you'd like to discuss, writing, team, or otherwise?
No, I think everything's been covered, and that's great.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much for your time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
That does it for episode 54 of the Southampton Delivery Podcast. I'd like to thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed it, even though it wasn't the most positive of shows. I'd like to thank my guest, Alex Hammond, for giving me his time. You can find him on Twitter at St. Hammond, and you can get his writing at Read Southampton and at La Liga News. I appreciate him being willing to share his thoughts on the club in this difficult time, and I hope that you enjoyed them as much as I did. This podcast is partnered with The Saints Report. For all of your Southampton FC news and needs, be sure to visit The Saints Report on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. The links are in the show notes. Be sure to check them out. Additionally, you can follow this show on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We're at SFCDELL_IVERY on Twitter and Instagram. And we're at facebook.com/SFCDelivery. There is no underscore in the Facebook address. If you're new to the show or you simply haven't done so yet, you can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Acast, Google Play, TuneIn Radio, or wherever else you get your podcast to be sure that you do not miss an episode. If you have been listening for some time and you've been enjoying the show, please consider leaving a review on iTunes. It only takes a second and it helps raise awareness about the show. If you can't or don't want to do that, please consider sharing the show with someone you know. Every new listener helps, and I truly appreciate it. All music for this episode comes courtesy of the Free Music Archive at freemusicarchive.org. The intro song is Epic Song by Boxcat Games. The end of show credits that you're listening to now is Aim is True by Poddington Bear. Links to all those are in the show notes, so be sure to check them out if you're interested. We'll be back next week with another episode. We'll look back at the Spurs match, we'll look ahead to the Watford FA Cup match, and hopefully we'll have some good news to share. Until then, remember that together, we march on.